Thomas Hardy does something unusual in Tess of d'Urbervilles. Hope I pronounced this correctly. He doesn't hide what kind of story this will be. He doesn't pretend it will surprise you. He warns us through landscapes, through colors, through small unsettling omens. The tragedy of Tess does not arrive suddenly. It approaches slowly. And the novel keeps whispering, something is wrong. This path is dangerous. Don't do this. But nobody listens. Hello and welcome to my channel. As you may guess, the subject of my very first video is the book that completely amazed me. You know that kind of book, the one you finish, close, and then you just sit there staring at the wall because you need some time to digest what just happened. When I started reading Tess of d'Urbervilles, I didn't know the plot. And I didn't expect much suspense. To be honest, I expected something polite, calm, and rather boring. Something like, Jane Austen, which I personally don't like, but that's the topic for another video. But what I got instead was rather shocking. As the story unfolded and moved towards the end, I was reading with my mouth literally open. What Hardy does there is completely unexpected for Victorian Britain. And what is more disturbing, it's still relevant today. The problems, the characters, the society. Very little has actually changed in more than a century. So grab some tea or coffee and let's talk. I will try to keep spoilers to a minimum. When Tess of d'Urbervilles was published in 1891, the Victorian society was furious. Not because the book was explicit, but because Hardy openly challenged the moral system people believed in. He challenged the church, which defined woman's worth through sexual purity. He challenged the law, which judged women far more harshly than men. And he challenged respectable readers who believed that suffering was proof of moral failure. Hardy made this impossible to ignore by adding a subtitle which caused outrage. A pure woman faithfully presented. And Victorian readers understood exactly what that meant. And many found it unforgivable. The reaction was so hostile that after Tess and later Jude the Obscure, Hardy stopped writing novels entirely and devoted himself only to poetry. This book didn't just cause scandal, it helped bringing an entire novel writing career to an end. So we meet Tess in her small home village. She is the eldest daughter in a poor rural family, which means responsibility lays on her first. And she accepts this. She's hardworking, obedient, she almost never complains. That's what I like about her. She's strong and no matter what happens, she tries to find a way to live with her circumstances. She doesn't hide, she doesn't collapse, she doesn't destroy herself, she endures. But everything begins to change when her father hears a rumor that he may be descended from a noble family called the d'Urbervilles, who supposedly came to England with William the Conqueror. You can imagine how impressive that sounds. And his reaction is unfortunate. Instead of continuing his work, he goes to the pub and celebrates his possible nobility the whole night. The next morning, of course, he can't go to the market to sell beehives. So Tess is asked to go instead. It's very early in the morning. The ride is long. She is exhausted. As she writes, she falls asleep. And Hardy tells us exactly what she dreams about. Wealth, knights, noble ancestry, the d'Urbervilles. And then she wakes up. An accident happens. The horse is killed. By the way, the horse's name is Prince, which is already telling because this is an ordinary peasant family, suddenly obsessed with nobility. But Hardy lingers to one image. The horse's blood soaking into Tess' white dress. This is the first clear omen. Before Tess has done anything that society would call wrong, her body is already marked. Misfortune comes first. Judgment comes later. Because Prince was family's livelihood, Tess feels responsible. And that responsibility turns into guilt. And guilt pushes her towards a dangerous decision. She agrees to go and to seek help from the d'Urbervilles. Her mother encourages her, tells her to dress nicely to attract the young gentleman, maybe even marry him, become a lady, solve all the family's problems. What else do some terrible mothers say to their daughters? But Hardy has already warned us. Nothing good will come from this. And this is where Alec d'Urberville enters the story. Alec is direct, persistent, intrusive. And there is something else about him that Hardy shows us very clearly. Something deeply disturbing. Alec never sees himself responsible. Again and again he shifts the blame on Tess. She's beautiful, so it's her fault. He is attracted, so it's inevitable. He desires, so she must have caused it. In Alec's logic, Tess is always responsible for what he feels, for what he does, and even for what he will do next. Hardy doesn't need to explain how dangerous this thinking is. He lets us watch it happen. And what makes it worse is that Tess, at times, almost believes him. That's how power works in this novel. Not only through force, but through blame. And another omen appears early. Alec gives Tess a rose, and a thorn pricks her chin. Blood appears again. Tess herself sees this as a bad omen, and she is right. It foreshadows physical and emotional harm Alec will later cause her. After everything that happens and its consequences, Tess survives. She doesn't disappear, she doesn't give up. She goes to work at a distant dairy farm to start again where no one knows her past. At this dairy farm, Tess meets Angel Clare. Angel speaks beautifully about ideas, honesty, purity, forgiveness. He rejects his family's religious career. He believes himself to be progressive. But Angel lives in a dream, like angels in heaven. And this becomes painfully clear when he goes to Brazil. To Angel, Brazil is an untouched land where he can start over. In reality, he becomes sick, weak, and fails completely. And this situation mirrors his relationship with Tess. He idealizes her, and when reality appears, his fantasy collapses. Angel talks about forgiveness, but he is not ready to forgive. And Hardy warns us again. On the day of Tess and Angel's wedding, a rooster crows in the afternoon. Hardy notes how strange this is. In rural belief, it's an ill omen, a sign that something is out of balance. And once again, the warning proves accurate. Later, Tess meets Alec again. Now he pretends to be religious. He manipulates her emotionally and then makes her swear an oath on a stone marked with cross. But later, Tess learns the truth about this stone. It isn't a holy cross at all. It's a boundary stone connected with punishment and death. Once again, what looks sacred offers no protection. And once again, the omen is right. Reading Tess of d'Urbervilles is a bit like reading a detective story, where from the very beginning you already know that Butler did it. There is no mystery about whether something terrible will happen. Hardy makes that clear early on. What keeps you reading is not suspense about the ending, but the slow, painful realization of how it happens. You watch every small choice, every ignored warning, every moment where something could have gone differently but doesn't. And that actually makes the story more disturbing, more interesting, not less. Because you're not shocked at the end, maybe a little. You are exhausted by the inevitability of it. And all of that inevitability leads us to the final place of the story, Stonehenge. Stonehenge is older than Christianity, older than English law, and older than Victorian morality. When Tess lies down on the stone, Hardy names it himself the Stone of Sacrifice. By this point, we understand something devastatingly simple. The tragedy was never hidden. Tess of the D'Urbervilles still hurts because it shows how injustice works quietly. Tess was blamed for dreams she was encouraged to have, punished for harm she didn't initiate, judged more harshly than men who wronged her. Parents, lovers, religion, society, all fail her. People follow rules. They believe they are moral. And responsibility keeps sliding downward onto the most obedient person. That's why this book still feels painfully modern, and that is why what Hardy wrote still matters. Hardy didn't write Tess to shock people. He wrote her to refuse their judgment. He shows a society where everybody follows the rules, and those rules destroy the most vulnerable person in the room. By calling Tess a pure woman, Hardy wasn't defending her actions. He was questioning the values used to condemn her. That was radical in 1891, and it's still uncomfortable now, because the book asks a question we don't like to answer. What if the problem isn't individual failure, but the moral system itself? That's why Tess doesn't fade with time. She stays. So if you haven't read Tess of the D'Urbervilles, I truly encourage you to do it. And if you have, share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read them. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.